A report claimed that 7 U.S. Navy personnel were killed and several others wounded in a violent clash aboard the U.S. aircraft carrier. The tensions reportedly began after a CENTCOM advisor faced angry crew members over complaints about the prolonged deployment. According to the allegation, the confrontation escalated into a violent fight involving knives, leaving 7 personnel reportedly dead and several others wounded. Another report stated that 6 sailors have allegedly tried to jump from the carrier. The most recent case was reported last Monday. The claims have been linked to the extreme conditions the crew is said to be facing. The U.S. Navy has remained silent on the reported incidents, but the families of sailors on board are now speaking out, and their complaints paint a troubling picture. Military families say their loved ones are struggling with poor conditions aboard the Lincoln. They confronted acting U.S. Navy Secretary Hung Kao over what they described as worsening conditions. And the anger did not end there. During a separate virtual meeting later that night, Navy leadership faced more questions from families of the roughly 5,000 sailors and Marines serving aboard the carrier. Their biggest concern is that morale is falling, while basic supplies are running low. Families say sailors are sometimes being served just half a cup of rice and 2 tortillas for a meal. The ship's store, they claim, often runs short of basics like soap, deodorant and toothpaste. But food and supplies are only a part of the story. Crew members are reportedly working long exhausting shifts, with some rarely getting a full day off. Then there are the living conditions, broken toilets, moldy showers with no hot water, and according to families, no laundry service for weeks. One parent reportedly said his son had even seen holes worn through the ship's deck. For the sailors living through it every day, this is far more than an inconvenience. Several troops' family members have come forward sharing the living conditions. Listen to this.
The morale is not good. Apparently, the ship's doctor or therapist said they need to hit port soon, or people are going to start, losing their minds.
I don't think people understand how bad the conditions are on the USS Abraham Lincoln. For at least 6 sailors to jump overboard or attempt to jump overboard. Conditions are that deplorable that people who have signed up to serve want to end things because it's that bad. Why are we keeping these service people on this boat? It's for a war that Donald Trump started that was unnecessary. This lands at him and Pete Hegseth's feet. They need to take accountability and responsibility. They don't need to sit there and say this is untrue. This is from sailors on the ship saying they have rotten food, unhygienic conditions, the mental health factor at play of being at sea in an enclosed space for 10 months. This is highly unusual. This is literally damaging our sailors. They're the ones who are to protect us. We must protect them as well. This is inhumane. This is cruel. They need to come home immediately.
I just received exclusive text messages from the wife of a service member on the USS Abraham Lincoln describing the horrific conditions he and his fellow service members are experiencing. One fellow soldier told him, quote, "I believe this is a training exercise to see how far we can push our service members before they break." "Hey honey, I'm eating cereal right now. Wish there was milk though. Haven't had milk in 3 months," he wrote. She asked why wasn't there milk. He said the supply ship that comes here can't bring fruits and stuff because it can't stay fresh long enough with the time it gets them to get here. They haven't had anything fresh but meat because it's freezed. Sometimes it gets here rotten. Families are just as frustrated as the people on the boat. This deployment is the worst one, and I pray no other boat goes through the same. Even people that have been deployed 100 times claim this is to be the worst and believe it cannot get worse than this. The Navy does not care. The mission always comes first. I was talking to some random dude at the smoke pit, and he was saying it's an experiment to see the government is doing, see how far they can push sailors' limits of being out to sea with the worst experience. I don't know anymore. I know my family needs me, and the Navy is not being fair right now, taking me away far longer than expected. Worst part, my expectations were already at an all-time low, but as per usual, the Navy beat those two by going lower than hell. So there's that.
Sometimes there are two stories that appear at roughly the same time that demand attention for what they really say about the state of life in the United States today. And we need to take these opportunities to point them out. The two stories I'm talking about was the great fiasco in Turkey about who was going to be on what plane, and I don't know, catering carts and reporters and Trump doing something else. And that's all journalism can talk about. There's somebody left them out there on the wrong fucking plane. Meanwhile, as these precious little darlings were being inconvenienced, there in somewhere Arabian Sea is something called the USS Abraham Lincoln. It is an aircraft carrier. It is named after, by most accounts, certainly our most famous, and I think most people would say our best president, Abraham Lincoln. There are 5,000 people on there. They've been deployed for 8 months. There are reports that some are trying to jump off an aircraft carrier in the ocean. You know how far it is from the deck of an aircraft carrier to the ocean? They're so overextended. They're so mentally depressed. You know how hard it is to be a sailor on an aircraft carrier? They only got 2 watches. I think it's like 4-4-4. Maybe there's a 2-hour watch. I don't know what in the Navy, but I know, have some idea of, and no one says a fucking word. All right, now we go to the U.S. president. We have our panel discussion. They actually leave you to air and bullshitting, and they let your plane. Oh my God, how terrible this is. What an unjust thing. Never fucking talking about these 5,000 sailors. Who again, let me show you this story just so you know. And by the way, this story appears in the Military Times. And you can follow Abraham Lincoln, or you can read the story in the Military Times. But our little darlings are so self-absorbed and so put out and so inconvenienced that they don't have time to talk about the fact that we're losing a fucking war. Or not losing it, we already lost it.
Donald Trump has just ordered 2,500 U.S. troops to be deployed to the Middle East. Don't go. Don't go.
The reason why I warned the military not to go is because this is an unwinnable war. And Donald Trump, your commander-in-chief, is a sociopath, which means that he does not care that the USS Abraham has been at sea for 9 months and you're running out of food. And the current food you have is disgusting. And it's why you've had multiple military members attempt to jump overboard, unaliving themselves, because you have a commander-in-chief that simply doesn't care. He's doing this because he was blackmailed into this, because he's in the e-files. This is not about nuclear weapons. I think we all can agree on that. As former cybersecurity director Joe Kent literally resigned over the fact that there were no nukes in Iran. He refused to send troops to Iran because the basis for which Donald Trump said he was going to be sending troops there was unfounded. It was a lie. He sent you there because the leader of you know which country is able to blackmail him into doing whatever he wants, because he has dirt on Trump. That's why I warned you not to go. Now, if you find yourself there and you find yourself in a position where you want to end yourself, you need to make it very clear to your superiors that you've been having thoughts of unaliving yourself. And hopefully they will send you home. Not guaranteed, but that's literally the only option that you have. This is no commander-in-chief, and you don't deserve to experience what you're experiencing, all for the sake of protecting his ass because he's a fucking pedo.
lot of you guys know I was in the Navy for a little over a decade. For those of you that don't, I was in the Navy for a little over a decade. I served on submarines and spent about 4 years of my life deployed. Almost all of that time was under the water, where we were isolated from the rest of the world. Now, I want to talk about what the sailors on board the USS Abraham Lincoln are going through. They left home on November 21st, 2025. They have gone more than 200 days without a port call. Let's talk about what that means, because I don't think people are disgusted enough by what they're going through. When we're deployed, sometimes the only thing we have to look forward to is a date on a calendar. That singular speck of light is what keeps people together. It keeps them focused and it keeps them sane. When that keeps getting ripped away, the psychological and emotional impact, like, I can't even explain how gut-wrenching it is to have that rug pulled out from underneath of you, let alone repeatedly. And the best of circumstances, being underway on a ship or a submarine sucks. Something as simple as a shower comes with restrictions. Get in, get wet, turn the water off. Lather up, turn the water on, rinse off, get out. We can only make so much clean water in a day, and we need to conserve every bit of it that we can. And when that machinery breaks down, showers are the first thing to go. Now, every single piece of communication that comes on and off the ship is scrubbed and scrutinized to make sure sensitive information isn't getting leaked. It's called OPSEC, or Operational Security. Incoming communications are also scrubbed to make sure that information that could be distracting isn't getting passed along. Your grandpa dies, not getting that message. Your spouse wants to leave, not getting that one either. You can find out when you get home. Now imagine you're supporting sensitive operations and all of that just gets completely cut off. You now exist in a world inside of the world that is isolated from everything. It's you and your shipmates and a lot of gray bulkheads, day after day after day. Then machinery starts breaking and you run out of parts. You run out of soap and laundry detergent. All the fresh food is gone and you're eating powdered eggs and rationed frozen shit. People start getting sick. Everyone is beyond exhausted. People start getting depressed and angry. You've missed holidays, birthdays, anniversaries. You start to forget what grass smells like. Haven't heard your kid laugh in months or hugged your parents. Every day your world gets smaller and eventually it crushes you. The only thing you have to tether yourself to is a date on a calendar. And when that goes away, so does your anchor. To my brothers and sisters on board the Lincoln, I love you guys. Stay strong.
This one made me sick, and it will you too. So sailors on a U.S. aircraft carrier are literally trying to jump off the ship, and the Navy has been denying that there's any problems at all since April. This is the USS Abraham Lincoln. This is a nuclear supercarrier out of San Diego, and it is now on the longest deployment for a modern carrier in history. A normal Navy carrier deployment runs about 6 to 7 months, and normally you would get a port call for a couple of days, roughly once a month, to decompress. The Lincoln left port last November. Trump and Netanyahu declared war on Iran, so the Navy directed it to the Middle East, and in over 8 months, it has touched land exactly twice. Once in Guam, where most sailors weren't even allowed off the ship, and once in Oman, where they were restricted to a secured compound. That is it. Over 250 days, breaking the modern record for consecutive days at sea without a real port call. That distinction matters because people are losing their minds. And we also know that they are not being properly cared for. In April, when families first started talking about food shortages and bad conditions, the Navy's official response in writing on X was that the reports were false, that the ship had sufficient food. By August, now, Military Times and Stars and Stripes had multiple sailors and family members on record describing hellish conditions. One wife says she got a call that her husband tried to jump overboard. He's now on medical hold and she hasn't heard from the Navy since. Another sailor physically stopped a shipmate from jumping. Stars and Stripes reported a parent saying their son told them that he and his shipmates, quote, constantly think about jumping off the ship just for relief. That is awful. Now, over 200 family members just showed up to a meeting with the acting Secretary of the Navy to demand answers. The Navy Admiral finally admitted on the record that the deployment is affecting sailors' health. So the Navy's plan now is to send the USS Theodore Roosevelt to relieve the Lincoln but they won't say when. And this is just unacceptable treatment by the military. Since April, they've been denying anything was happening, and now in August, here we are, sailors are trying to jump off a moving aircraft carrier. And nobody senior enough to fix it acted until families literally went to the press. This is what happens when the chain of command is too busy pushing testosterone shots to actually care for its service members. And when leadership is too dishonest to admit when it's screwing up and rejects competency over zealotry. If this makes you as angry as it makes me, call your representatives today. Ask them two things. First, to relieve the Lincoln's crew now. No more extensions. And second, demand accountability for how Secretary Hegseth has handled this. Because it's not enough to just say thank you for your service. After all, gratitude is more than just lip service. It's an action. It's also care. And right now, our service members are getting anything but.